It's 1974. Danny Cohen and a group of engineers are on the cusp of something monumental. They are attempting the world's first real-time voice conversation over a packet network, and they've already had several failed attempts. But little did they know, they were about to fundamentally change human communication forever.
When we speak, air from our lungs moves vocal cords like these in our throats.
It goes without saying, but the human voice is perhaps one of the most powerful evolutionary developments in the history of life on this planet.
Hey!
But it wasn't until 1876, some 300,000 years after the emergence of Homo sapiens, that Alexander Graham Bell first demonstrated what he called the electrical speech machine. And for the next 86 years, our telephone conversations would remain in the analog realm. However, in 1962, with the introduction of the T-carrier system in the United States, voice communication was digitized on a mass scale. And by this point in the 60s, there were well-understood methods of how to do this reliably. Human speech is actually fairly forgiving. It remains intelligible even at very low sample rates like 2,000 hertz. But 8,000 hertz is what the telephone network used, and it worked very well with the copper infrastructure installed all around the world. But in the early 70s, the new packet-based network being developed called ARPANET presented both an opportunity and a significant challenge. There was interest early on in so-called real-time applications for ARPANET, including transmitting voice. Bob Kahn, a program manager for DARPA, created the Network Secure Communications Group, later called Network Speech Compression, in late 1972, with Danny Cohen of ISI, the Information Sciences Institute at the University of Southern California, taking lead. The real driver for this interest, though, was the military. The US military funded the DARPA program, and they had a vested interest in transmitting voice over packet networks like ARPANET, as it would make encrypting communication easier to implement and harder to break. Cohen even told the Computer History Museum that NSA officials would regularly frequent the NSC meetings at ISI to gain insight into their progress. And the technical challenges of transmitting voice on ARPANET were huge. While human speech might be very forgiving in terms of frequency characteristics, one thing it is not forgiving of is changes in timing. Packet-based networks like ARPANET and the internet were first designed to transmit data, such as text, and the completeness mattered more than the speed. If an email takes an extra second to arrive, nobody notices. But if even a single byte is missing, the data could be corrupted. So these networks were built to prioritize reliability of data, making them resilient to the inevitable issues that can arise in the underlying data transmission. Most of us are familiar with latency, which is the overall time it takes for data to travel from point A to point B. But because packets travel independently across a network, likely competing with other traffic along the way, they don't all take the same amount of time to arrive. One packet might take 100 milliseconds, and the next might take 150. This variance is called jitter, and it means packets can arrive out of order, or sometimes not at all. For computer data, this can be worked out with error detection and retransmission. But for voice, it's a little more complicated. The techniques to ensure integrity of data on packet networks conflicted with real-time voice communication. Outright packet loss wasn't a huge deal. If I remove every other sample from my voice, you can still very clearly understand what I'm saying. But if some of the samples of my voice are randomly reordered and delayed, it can be very hard to understand. Cohen knew they needed to address these issues, so Bob Kahn arranged a meeting between Cohen and Vint Cerf, who was evangelizing their new Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP. Cohen knew this upcoming protocol was less than ideal for voice, and he illustrated this fact to Cerf using the analogy of milk and wine. Voice data is like milk. You have to deliver it on time before it spoils, even if it means spilling some along the way. Meaning the timing of delivery is key here, not whether you get every single bit of data to the destination intact. Whereas wine can take its time. Just like traditional data, you want to make sure you get something authentic and complete. To get around these issues, Cohen developed the Network Voice Protocol in early 1974. It traded reliability for a higher bandwidth and lower delays by only using the absolute minimum of the existing NCP protocol. Simultaneously, they were also further developing ways of digitally encoding speech with both CVSD and linear predictive coding, as the existing pulse code modulation method required 64 kilobits of bandwidth, far exceeding the 50K ARPANET links. And in August of 1974, the group tested a call between Randy Cole at ISI and across the country to Jim Forgey at MIT's Lincoln Laboratory using the CVSD encoding method. And while the call worked in the sense that they could hear one another, the speech was unintelligible and they couldn't actually carry on a conversation. This, however, verified that the network voice protocol had merit. And after even more failed attempts, they finally had success in December of that year. This time using the linear predictive coding method, a call between the Lincoln Laboratory and Color Harrison Incorporated, an ARPANET node in Goleta, California, resulted in a conversation between the two groups. The delay between sending and receiving was upwards of 3 seconds, and the sample rate was only 3.2 kilohertz, which would have sounded something like this. But this was the first ever voice conversation over a packet network. So after this success and the continued insistence of Cohen, David Reed, and others for a more suitable protocol for voice, the new transmission control protocol was split in two, with IP becoming its own protocol drafted by John Postel, and UDP and RTP being developed specifically with real-time applications like voice in mind. And think about how significant this is. The fact that TCP and IP are separate and distinct protocols is due in part to packet voice. And these experiments in packet voice would continue throughout the next decade. There were proposals like the Internet Stream Protocol in 1979. Voice encoding was further developed too, with the release of the G722 codec in 1988, and the NetPhone Unix program, released in 1991 by Brian Wiles and John Walker, was one of the first ever voice over IP applications. But halfway around the world, two friends in Israel were about to embark on a journey that would kickstart an entire industry. In 1985, Alon Cohen and Lior Haramati were both serving their conscripted military service for the Israeli Defense Force. Cohen had been in the communications R&D unit for about a year before Haramati transferred there after a short stint as a pilot.
One of the chores in that workplace was to stay at night and guard the place. It was basically a secret lab, and so we had to stay there, lock it, and make sure there's somebody manning the place. We were working at the same, in the same department, but one night we stayed together, so it happened, and we started talking about our passion, and turns out we had the same interest in voice and the recordings and audio and computers and whatnot, and we both like to stay the nights so we could play with the computers that we had there.
Haramati had a Sinclair ZX Spectrum at home that he had been hacking for better audio capability, and this shared interest in audio and voice led them to a joint project that they eventually called VocalTec.
And then we thought, PCs came out, right? And we thought maybe we should build a sound card for the PC. That's the first thing. If you want to do audio, you need to have a sound card, right?
So in 85, we already had a prototype, and actually prototype back then was wire wrapping, if you even know what it is. But we already, after the proof of concept with the first one and deciding what we're doing, we actually designed and manufactured the first 10 sound cards, which, remember, we didn't have through holes plated because we wanted to save money. So we had to solder every through hole in order to complete the circuit.
And because of their limited resources, the hardware in their card was actually very simple and mostly software driven, requiring them to be very efficient in their programming.
We have to remember the computational and speed of the computers was not that great, to say the least, and memory was very limited. So being efficient in everything that we did was something that actually not only forced us to be very good at making things work efficiently, but it also affected a lot of things that we did in the future, because it enabled us to do things efficiently and not just try to use the maximum power of the computer to do stuff. So
Their first product, coined the Speech Board, had barely been on the market when the Creative Labs Sound Blaster emerged, instantly killing their hopes of competing in the brand new sound card market.
So again, when Creative Labs came out, that's where we had to pivot, and we had to think, what are we doing next? Because we can't compete. Two Israelis can't compete with Chinese manufacturing and American marketing.
And that's when someone called Elon Gnor joined the fledgling company. He was a medical doctor by training, and he had already made one career pivot into import-export in Panama. But then he got an Apple II, and he was about to make another.
It came with a floppy drive, 5.25 inch, and nothing else. No software, no nothing. So I started learning how to program, and I started buying some programs from the United States. I got into computers very much, and my mind was wandering, because I have many interests. I always been a very curious guy.
Gnor returned to Israel, where he met Cohen and Haramati, and he agreed to come on to help them with the speech board.
And I was trying to take this product, the card, to the international markets, trying to interest people. And we had this concept of what we called business audio. We said Sound Blaster is for games, and we were kind of toying with it for some 2 years or 2 or 3 years. I mean, quite a long time. This is 91, 92, 93, and we were going nowhere.
And in addition to the speech board, they also came up with other products like the CAT, a sound card that had a parallel port interface, intended for laptops that lacked expansion slots.
And we engineered this product, which was we called it the CAT. Okay, it has on the part here there were input for a microphone, for earphones, or you could do it with a phone connection.
They co-marketed this product with WordPerfect, but it didn't pan out. Hardware was proving to be a dead end for VocalTec.
So we had to change direction, and we thought, what is our strengths, right? And we know communication, we know telecom in general, because we came from the telecommunication wing, right? So we kind of decided that maybe the next application, and again, software, is going to be replacing the PBX in the office.
Their idea was to transmit and receive audio between computers on a local area network. And they had actually explored this idea back in '87, but with LAN still in their relative infancy back then, the idea was shelved. But now in the early '90s, the presence of LANs was becoming much more commonplace.
But the interesting principle that was guiding us, we said, if we were working in IBM, we would probably have a PhD sitting and trying to do a research on what it takes to transfer audio through a packetized network. And after a year of research, he's probably going to find out that there are only a set of maybe 3 or 4 problems, right? Packet loss, jitter, change of the order of the packets, and also different sampling frequencies between the sound cards.
So crawling between clocks, as they call.
Yeah, mismatch of the clock. So instead of doing a year of research, let's figure out how to solve those problems.
And the most crucial issue they needed to tackle was how to stream audio consistently, regardless of changing network conditions.
If you give a software developer and you say, you have to transfer the audio, they would probably build something, do buffer here, buffer there. But we kind of anticipated that the latency is going to be a major issue. And so the concept was how to create a jitter buffer, but how to maintain it dynamically so it's really the smallest, so that the latency of the call would first adapt to the network conditions, but second would be minimum latency at all times.
You want to maintain a flow of continuous stream of audio, but minimize the delay as much as possible at the same time. And what we figured out is that, first of all, we can't really get any information from the sending side for doing that monitoring, because we don't have time to do the exchange of information, because that's part of the problem that we have. We want a minimal delay. So we have to figure out everything only on the receiving side. So all the analysis of what to do is on the receiving side. And we actually structured a very relatively simple, simple after you know how to do it, of course, but relatively simple set of things that needs to be done on the receiving side in order to guess, in a way, how to minimize that buffer to the lowest latency or the shortest latency possible while maintaining a continuous audio.
Well, we were designing it for any network. We didn't know what to expect. Turns out the local area networks were pretty good, so no packet loss, not too much jitter. It was pretty good.
Coined VocalChat, their new product was released to the public in 1993. There was just one problem though. No one really needed it.
Then we brought this in 1993 at a trade show in Atlanta. We came there, we had a small booth for a very small company, 10 feet, and lots of interest. But everybody was saying, who the hell needs this? We have our internal phone, we can dial to each other from my office to your office. Why do I need that? And we came with the concept that this is something that, of course, it didn't fly. It didn't work.
Seemingly back to square one, Ganor recruited entrepreneur Daniel Nissan to come work on product development. The two had met in Hanover during a CeBIT conference a couple of years prior, and Nissan's first impression of the VocalChat software was less than enthusiastic.
This is a stupid idea. Why would somebody need to have two speakers, a microphone, a sound card just to call somebody in the next room where everybody has a phone on the desk? But you know what, guys? There is something called internet, and it's a global network. And if we can connect our software to the internet, then I see huge success, because that would really create a new communication platform and would enable really people to speak to each other for free.
And this idea was a huge deal. If you're not old enough to remember, long-distance calls could be extremely expensive back in the 90s, many times costing several dollars per minute to call outside of your country. But Nissan had been exposed to the promise of the internet through previous work with EMT Computing, Israel's exclusive distributor of Sun Microsystems.
And that's an important part of the story, because Sun Microsystem, right from the beginning, early 80s, shipped the computers TCP/IP connected to the internet. And you have FTP and Telnet and terminal and everything I never knew from PCs, I came to learn when I was working at the Sun Microsystem.
There were already voice over IP programs like Maven for the Macintosh that could be integrated into CU/CME, but those didn't work well over dial-up connections. So it was unclear if VocalChat was going to be any different. But after implementing TCP/IP, they were ready for their first test.
So I drove to Jerusalem, where BRM, a very famous venture capital group, was based. And they had a connection between their office to the office of Checkpoint Software that later became to be a huge success in the firewall business. And between those, so we connected, and this was the first really true long-distance internet phone call. We heard something like rubble on the line. You could hear noise, but you could not hear a conversation. And I remember driving back from Jerusalem to the office of VocalTec in Herzliya, and it's about an hour drive, and I was so excited in my tiny car, and so this is it, it's working, we'll figure out what didn't work. And I came to the office. I remember I walked to, and we had a very long office, and the first office at the hallway was Elon's office. And I walk in and said, "Bonanza, we did it." He says, "Why are you so happy?" Everybody came and said it was a bad test and nothing worked. He says, "No, it worked. They'll figure it out." And I heard noise. It's working.
And the problem ended up being a simple one. Their original test used TCP to connect the calls, but thanks to those early experiments with voice in the 70s, they had another more suitable protocol called a UDP at their disposal.
And then the moment they changed the protocol to do that, was everything was working fine.
But the internet brought a new challenge. It's easy enough to find out how to call people on a local area network, but how would you even find people to contact on the internet back then?
Back then, there wasn't any NAT, right? You would dial in with the modem, you would get an IP address. So if your IP address is your phone number, let's put it this way, every time you connect, you get a different one. How do you find your friends, right? It keeps changing. So we thought, well, we need some sort of a directory service. What is the most accessible directory that we could find? It was the IRC. So we used the IRC network as our directory service.
So the audio was point to point, not going through any servers, but finding the IP of the other person was through the IRC.
The IRC.
And with the directory problem seemingly conquered, they knew they had a potentially massive product launch ahead of them. This was a one-of-a-kind product that could revolutionize human communication by putting it on the internet, allowing someone in California to talk to someone in Bangladesh only for the cost of their internet service. But the problem was they were running out of money fast.
I mean, it was running out. It was running out of money. And the VCs did not agree to invest additional money, and they were scared. They did not see the tremendous impact of shortcutting all the long-distance calls costs. So I said I'm flying to the US, and I went straight to the Silicon Valley with Leo, and we started knocking on doors. Nobody would listen.
But soon they came across the office of Benay Alajem, the founder of Packard Bell.
We are now coming to LA, to the offices of Packard Bell. I'm bringing I call it luggable. It's a laptop, but a big one. And inside it had our card and so on. And we put it on. We have our guy in Israel waiting for us because he knows the time to create an internet phone call. And I'm putting a connection to the internet in LA, in their office, in Packard Bell's office. And I click on Ofer's name. He is in Israel, and he answers. And the guys are saying, what is this? The Packard Bell guys, what the hell is this? They were shocked, totally shocked.
This demonstration to Packard Bell would end up being a lifeline for the struggling company, as their shock quickly turned into an opportunity.
Who did you speak to this about? I said, to Creative Lab. And he said, no, don't talk to them. So the guy from Packard Bell picks up the phone, calls the guy, the president of Crystal Semiconductor. They hear what it is. They say, don't do anything with the Creative Labs. They're their competitors. And they hate them. So they said, stay there. We're coming over with my private jet, which is the president of Crystal Semiconductor, coming from Austin, Texas, to the Silicon Valley.
He received a verbal offer from Cirrus Logic for an additional $12 million investment, which completely changed the tone of conversation with his investors in Israel.
They didn't sign it yet, but I had the verbal commitment. Very different. But I flew back to Israel as if I have the commitment, speak to my VCs. They forgot all their hesitance. The entire mood had changed from being totally depressed. So immediately another investor, bank in Israel, called us, said, we want to invest money. I said, I'm agreeing. I will take $2.5 million for $25 million value, 10% of the company, in one condition, that I don't meet you even once. I don't have the time to meet you.
So with their immediate future secured, development could continue on the new software, which was now coined Internet Phone. A patent was filed in November of 1994 for their audio transceiver technology, detailing their dynamic jitter buffer that enabled voice communication over dial-up modems. And with all the pieces in place, they were ready to launch Internet Phone to the world.
Yes, but it preceded with a 2 weeks press tour where Elon and me schlepped around. I was carrying a desktop under my armpit in February, and standing in Logan Airport in February, dressed with Israeli clothes with a computer under my arm, was pretty damn freezing. So we had a 2-week press tour where we had 3 to 4 meetings, sometimes 5 meetings a day with reporters, demonstrating internet phone to them and telling them they cannot announce until Monday the 15th.
That's because they had given Wall Street Journal exclusive rights to announce their product on Friday, February 10th of 1995, with the headline, "Hello World." The world had just been given its first glimpse at the future of digital communication, and everyone wanted to know more.
That Friday, I came to the office at 6 o'clock in the morning. The phone was ringing off the hook, 8 lines. Eddie and me, we were only 2 people in the office, were taking the phones one after the other just to answer. All the press, all, TV, people, it was unbelievable, just like in the movies. You cannot imagine what happened that day. I left the office at midnight, and the phone still didn't stop ringing. It's just that I was, falling off my feet out of tiredness.
And the software itself wasn't the only revolutionary thing about Internet Phone. Nissan championed an effort to sell and distribute the software online, something that was still very new in that era.
So there was no way to charge credit cards. So what we did, people who were brave enough to put the credit card number on our website, we stored that information on the server, a big no-no. And every morning we were downloading that file with all the credit card and user information, including their email address. And we had temps in the morning that were typing on Veriphones those numbers to charge the card and then send the licensing code to the person. So this was our automated, charging mechanism. So at one point we had like 8 to 10 temps that were coming every morning and punching in numbers on Veriphones to charge the cards. We were doing great. Yes, the company became profitable within a couple of weeks.
Internet Phone was receiving rave reviews. It was fulfilling one of the foreseen revolutions of the internet, to instantly connect people all around the world with a click of a button. And it was unofficially referred to as iPhone by the press, over a decade earlier than the one we're all familiar with. But just as VocalTec's success was building, their very foundation was about to be rocked at its core. VocalTec's popularity meant their directory service, the one using IRC, was seeing massive amounts of use. The problem was that they used the public IRC servers, mostly hosted by universities and research institutions.
The universities started to see a list of iPhone number on the users. No data is being exchanged. They couldn't figure out what it's going on. They traced it back to VocalTec, and they see, oh, those guys are selling something for money because you had to pay for the download. And we're not making anything from this. We barely run our servers in the universities for the IRC network.
And IRC users began debating this at length on news groups. Should IRC servers be used for commercial activity like this? While they were only using the servers essentially as an IP resolver, it still used up resources of a free service. And the admins decided enough is enough.
And obviously the first guy that jumped on this story was Jeff Pulver.
But when we finally had operability of the interop, people don't understand what ChatGPT does. I was in Rwanda a couple of summers ago. Maybe you want to be your own CAIO. You might want one, but you don't need one. If you ever play Monopoly, maybe you know the B&O Railroad. Anyway, I'm Jeff.
Jeff Pulver is perhaps the world's authority on voice over IP, and has authored books, led the Voice on the Net conferences, and even has an FCC order named after him. And he can talk about voice over IP a lot.
I subscribed to the See You, See Me mailing list, and I was commuting on the Long Island Railroad to Manhattan. I used to work at Canada Fitzgerald Securities, and in February, I saw the announcement of VocalTec launching Internet Phone. After a few days, I realized this is so cool, but people were posting things to See You, See Me as a way to find other people on Internet Phone. So I had a Sun computer in my home, because everyone should, and I ended up setting up a mailing list. I set up the iPhone mailing list on my home computer, on my Unix box. And that became the place where the iPhone community went to post questions. And I had no commercial relationship whatsoever with VocalTec. Boom, within a few weeks, I had thousands of people that were lurking on the mailing list. And since no one else would answer a question about how to use it, I started. Now, I wasn't, I had no expertise in any of that. I was a hobbyist like you or anyone else. But when someone had a question, I answered it. Luckily for the fate of VocalTec and for the free world, I was also on the IRC mailing list. You see, VocalTec pissed off a lot of people. I made myself a VocalTec's internet ambassador. And I decided just because someone didn't know better doesn't mean that they should be penalized. So it wasn't because VocalTec wanted to take advantage of the kindness of educational institutions. It's just that they didn't know better. And some people at the EDUs got a little pissy. And so on my own little server, I set up an IRC server. Guess what? It worked. Because it turned out what happened was the next version of IRC, I think it was 261, there was going to be a patch that specifically blocked internet phone. And I saw that coming. And so I did two things. First, I set up my own server. And for an experiment, I said, change the IP address to this and use these ports. It worked. And, at the beginning, only a few people came on. And ultimately, everyone came on. And I spent days attempting to reach VocalTec in Herzliya, Israel from my office phone. It took a long time to get their damn attention. It wasn't until April. This was after they got blocked. But luckily, there were people at VocalTec who realized that I had a mailing list, and all of a sudden they start to read it. And between the time they were blocked and the time that we launched, it took about less than 4 weeks. And we set up, if you will, a private IRC network, server network for VocalTec, so that we were no longer at the discretion of certain sysops to block iPhone.
With Pulver's last-minute save, the future of internet phone was finally secure. After the trail was blazed by Netscape's explosive IPO in August of 1995, VocalTec soon followed their steps on February 6th of 1996, debuting at $19 a share, placing them in the history books as one of the earliest .com IPOs. But here's the thing, Mark and I had never heard of internet phone prior to researching for this video. Despite being on the net in 1996, we have no recollection of it. In fact, my earliest memory of something like this was Microsoft's Net Meeting, which was released over a year after the initial iPhone release. So we want to try it out. We want to bring back the original iPhone, but that means we need to find a copy. Looking on archive.org, the earliest version we could find was version 3.11, a full year after the initial release. There were later versions like 4.0, which included a whiteboard and video capabilities, and version 5.0, which was the latest release that came out in 1997. To find an even earlier version, we had to search a bit deeper. Remember those newsgroup postings about iPhone and IRC? They mentioned iPhone 06, and this post was in February, right around the time of their announcement. And then we found another post that mentioned iPhone 06.exe, so this is likely the file name it was distributed under. Searching for that file name, we don't really find anything. But searching for iPhone 06.zip, there is one result, and it's on a BBS. Signing into the Out West BBS, we quickly found the file and downloaded it. After getting it unzipped on our Ambra 486 with Windows 3.1, we immediately see a TCP IP error. So we need 4 things to get this working: a NIC, which we already have, a packet driver, and something called a shim, which enables the packet driver to work in Windows. From there, we also need a TCP IP stack like Trumpet WinSock. After getting that configured, we can finally launch iPhone. 78, not bad. And after poking around a little bit, it was clear that you can't really do much without being connected. And we can see the list of IRC servers here. So in order to get this to work, we need our own IRC server. Luckily, that's super easy, and in a matter of minutes, we had one ready. Yes! Wow, that was kind of easy. Now that we're connected, let's get another host on as well.
Let me see if it's still running.
Oh, it's on, it's on. You're on.
Oh, wow.
All right. Go to the call button where it's the person's face with the phone. Look at that.
Yeah.
There I am.
Do I just hit OK?
Oh no, not iPhone user. Looking at TCP dump, we see that the software is passing a string of characters in the user field. And looking at the IRC log, it looks like it's stripping these characters out. So maybe they're needed to identify iPhone users. Mark found a setting to disable this behavior, and after trying again, oh my God, all right, go try it.
All right, IRC connected.
All right, I'm gonna try to call. Oh my God. Calling Mark.
Did you?
Yeah.
Are we on?
Yeah, dude, we're on.
It didn't
think.
ask me to accept, but it did go green.
No, it's auto accept. It's on by default.
Sweet.
But then we realized we didn't even have microphones. And finally, it was time to make the call. Well, here goes. Oh, user not online. Hello, can you hear?
Can you hear me?
Yep, yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, come in loud and clear.
Yeah, come in loud and clear.
I wouldn't call it clear, but yeah, it is working. I can hear you.
Why does anyone need to use Slack? We could just keep on using this. This works great.
Keep on using this. This works great.
Yeah, pretty cool.
So getting it working was a little anticlimactic. Voice communication nowadays is no big deal, but it really did work well until we hit the 60-second demo limit. The success of Internet Phone helped spawn an entire industry as everyone began to realize the promise and commercial viability of voice communication over the internet. But the thing is, voice over IP wasn't invented by any one person or company. From the ARPANET experiments in the 70s to the decades-long work on protocols like H323, RTP, and SIP, and people like Marion Croak at AT&T, who led the charge to make voice over IP what it is today. And what ended up happening with VocalTec? In August of 1996, they introduced the first voice over IP to PSTN gateway, allowing internet phone users to call traditional phone lines around the world without any long-distance charges. Gateways were Windows NT systems outfitted with dialogic cards that connected to the local phone network. Set up around the world, they could even allow traditional phone users to bypass long-distance charges completely by calling a local number, connecting across the internet to another gateway, and connecting to the local number at the destination. With this technology, they helped start one of the first voice-over-IP native telecom providers, ITXC. And today, VocalTec's remnants live on in Magic Jack after a reverse takeover in 2010. And many VocalTec employees went on to take huge roles at companies behind many of the video conferencing apps that we use today.
Maybe I should open a parenthesis here and tell you that the chief technology officer of Zoom was a VocalTec employee. The guys that were running Skype, David Gule and others, were VocalTec employees. The guy that is, until now more or less, I think he just resigned or so from Google and have the Google Meets and so forth, David Rosenthal was a VocalTec employee. All these people brought technology to these companies that whose products you're using now, all came from VocalTec. We seeded the market.
It was amazing. It was exciting. We were everywhere. People knew of us. I was quoted everywhere in the press, Alon and other people from the company, going to TV shows, radio shows. We were kind of celebrities back then.
People were interviewing us in '95 when we came out with it, and they were saying, how is it to be an overnight success? And I used to say, it's great, but that overnight is about 10 years long.
Many people don't know the story, and VocalTec, it's an unsung hero.
But VocalTec and everything before it was only the beginning of the voice-over-IP story. A new device was coming that would change everything. Thanks for watching the Serial Port, and we'll see you next time.
All kidding aside, getting the software to work proved to be an almost impossible mission. Fortunately, I knew a mole inside Alon Ganor's company, VocalTec.
This is not valid registration code.
And after he guided me through 94 minutes of computer adjustments, Ganor and I were chatting over the internet.
Well, I'm ready.
He from New York, and me from LA.
What do you think Alexander Graham Bell would think of this device?
I think he would probably love it.
In most places, it's a local call to hook your computer into the internet, and this global computer network doesn't care how near or how far you're communicating.
From the third floor of his Long Island home, Jeff Pulver can reach out and touch the world, and do it for pennies.
Alex, are you around?
Yeah, hi, Jeff.
Nice to hook up with you on internet phone.
Pulver is chatting with Alex Balfour in London, but they are not using traditional phone technology. They're using the internet.